Today we're going to be looking at some properties of algebra. Specifically right now we're looking at replacement. And I should probably tell you that Mr. Wallace likes to use more parentheses than I do. I like to use parentheses to avoid confusion. I don't like using parentheses when it adds to the confusion. Mr. Wallace, in this case, likes to use parentheses no matter what in order to be consistent. But the problem we're looking at is P times parentheses Q plus 6. And the value of P is 3 and the value of Q is 5. And so the first thing we're going to do is to replace the variables. A variable is a quantity, usually a letter, that represents a value. Well, there you go. We've replaced the variables with numbers, or we've substituted them. And we have 3 times parentheses 5 plus 6. Now, of course, we work with our parentheses first. 5 plus 6 is 11, and we're going to multiply it times 3. And our product is 33, and that is the solution to our problem. Let's try something a little bit more complicated. How about x plus zx, parentheses, 3 minus z, close paren, times x over 3, when x equals negative 6 and z equals negative 2. So there you go. We've replaced all of the variables with the corresponding values, and we placed them in parentheses as I thought made clear. And one thing is this outside parentheses here within 3 minus negative 2, it should be a bracket because you don't place a parentheses within a parentheses, you use a bracket, but we're just going to leave the parentheses there since it's not going to change the function of this. And we're going to go to our innermost parentheses first, and we're going to change the negative 2 to a positive 2 because there's a negative on the outside of that parentheses, and we told you that's equivalent to negative 1 times whatever in the parentheses. And we have 3 plus 2. Now moving from left to right, this parentheses is as simple as possible, so is this, and this one needs to be added. So now all of our parentheses are as simple as they can be. So again, moving from left to right, why don't we multiply negative 2 times negative 6? And before we do that, why don't we multiply the negative times the negative? And that will be positive 2 times positive 6. Positive 2 times positive 6 is 12. Times 5 is 60. And why don't we move that negative 6 in a little bit closer? And we're going to divide negative 6 by 3. And that will be negative 2 times 60 is negative 120. And plus negative 6 is negative 126, and that is our answer. Now let's look at some problems where we have variables, but we don't know what the value of the variables are. But we can still simplify them if we know what the like terms are. A term is a single number or variable, or numbers and variables multiplied together or divided. Terms are separated by positive signs or negative signs. A like term is a term whose variables and their exponents are the same. Note, the coefficients can be different. A coefficient is a number placed before and multiplying or dividing the variable or variables. So here we have some numbers and variables, and we have some numbers and variables attached to each other. That would make 5 the coefficient of x, negative 8 would be the coefficient of x, and 7 would be the coefficient of y. And we can add the variables if they are like terms. X and x are like terms, and we disregard the coefficient as far as considering whether or not they are like terms. So we can add the 5x plus the negative 8x. And now we have negative 3x minus 2y plus 7y. We can add the y's together, and that would give us 5y. So our answer is negative 3x plus 5y. We cannot add x and y. They are not like terms, and that is our answer. And here we have something a little bit more complicated, and we're going to start with the first term, which would be x squared. Well, we have 8x squared, and we have negative 2x squared, and that's it. So why don't we add those together? And that gives us 6x squared, and we cannot add the other x's to it because they are not like terms. The variables and the exponents attached to them must be exactly the same. So let's move to the next term. That would be negative 3x, and we can add 4x to that, and that will give us 1x, and there's no need to put a 1 in front of the variable. It's always understood that the number in front of a variable is 1 if there isn't a coefficient there. So let's look at 7 and negative 3. Let's add those together, which is 4, and that will be our answer. That will give us 6x squared plus x plus 4. Now let's look at some distributive properties. Distributive property is the way we multiply numbers or variables in a parentheses. So we have a parentheses b plus c, and that will equal ab plus ac. That is to say, the a applies to everything in the parentheses. It applies to the b and the c. Now, it's a common mistake to apply a multiplier next to a parentheses next to the first thing in the parentheses. It applies to everything in the parentheses. So here we have 4 times parentheses 2x minus 7. So we're going to multiply 4 times everything in the parentheses. And we have 8x minus 28. Remember, multiply that 4 times both numbers in the parentheses. Let's try something a little more complicated. How about negative 7 times 5x minus 6? Now when we have a negative number in front of the parentheses, we multiply the numbers in the parentheses times the number and the negative. So it's going to be negative 7 times 5x and negative 7 times negative 6, which is going to make the second number in the parentheses positive. And our answer is negative 35x plus 42. Okay, this time we have a negative attached to the parentheses, so we're going to multiply the negative times everything in the parentheses, or we're going to distribute the negative to the parentheses. And we're going to multiply the negative times x4. And the way we do that is we treat the negative as if it's negative 1. Negative 1 times 4x is negative 4x. And the next term is going to be positive, and the next term is going to be negative. And that is your answer. Remember, apply that negative to everything in your parentheses. Now let's try something a little bit more complicated. In this problem, notice the 5 and the 3 are separated by a positive sign. That means the 5 will not be applied to the parentheses, but the 3 will because the 3 is attached to the parentheses. And since we're multiplying with a positive 3, all of the numbers in the parentheses are going to retain their signs. So we have 5 plus 6x minus 12. There are no x's except for the 6x, so we'll leave that alone. But we can add the 5 and the negative 12. And that will be negative 7, but it's in the wrong order. X's come before units. And that is the correct answer, and that is the correct order. Now let's deal with 2 parentheses at a time. Now this is really the same thing, except that we're doing it twice in the same problem. Let's multiply 4 times the first parentheses. And we have 12x minus 32, both terms retaining their same signs. and we have a negative sign in front of the next parentheses, so we're going to distribute that negative to both terms in the parentheses. And so the first term is going to end up being negative, and the second term is going to end up being positive. Make sure that you apply that negative to both terms in the parentheses. Very common mistake not to do that. There we go, and we can add 12x plus negative 2x. And we have negative 32 plus 7. That's negative 25, and our answer is 10x minus 25. And our homework tonight is on pages 25 and 26. And if you're getting a little bit lost here, you should be keeping notes. You should be watching the videos 3 or 4 times. And if you're getting your answers wrong, go over your notes and see if you're applying the rules correctly. Make sure you're following PEMDAS. And until next time, thank you for watching.